Again, we still have a bunch of folks coming in. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes before we get rolling. I may give 1 extra minute to get everybody on board here. So again, thanks for your timeliness. And if you're just joining us, throw in the chat where you're from. Not necessarily where you're from, but where you are today. There you go. Looks like Ohio's off to the early lead from those of you that have responded. Welcome, Kendra and Lisa from Ohio. There we go. We got Tallahassee, Massachusetts. Tanisha, don't tell us how great the weather is, please. I don't want to hear it. Anastasia, welcome from Texas. Georgina, if I pronounced that incorrectly, I apologize. Vancouver, welcome. What a beautiful part of the world. Aloha, Kat. There we go. We're getting it all. The 50th. Is it the 50th or 49th? Uh-oh, my apologies to Hawaii or Alaska. Need to open up the encyclopedia. Check that out. For those of you that don't know what an encyclopedia, I'll cover that at the end of today's presentation. There we go. Once again, aging myself. Braden, welcome, Vancouver, another. Canada's in the house. Kat, thanks for confirming. Hawaii is the 50th state, not the 49th. So you learn something every day, right? I'm hoping that that's not the only thing you all learned today that weren't sure, but we'll see. We're getting there, gang. 2 more minutes, 2 more minutes. Hopefully we see a lot of people showing up. We've got a bunch on already. Okay, gang, I'm going to get started. It is 1:30 and I want to thank all of you for being on time. To those of you that are repeat visitors to our webinar series, thank you. You maybe just keep showing up to see if I ever get it right. But I also, those of you that are first timers to one of our webinars, I really hope you find value in this, and that you visit us again. So we love providing value to the community. This happens to be a hot topic. Based on the number of people that registered for this particular webinar, it's another hot topic: culture and onboarding, or whatever you call the process for welcoming a new employee into your organization. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Expectations for today: 1, let's reinforce the importance of culture as the centerpiece for your new employee introduction or your new employee's welcome. 2, share some best practices, some ideas from my career and what how we help our clients, in a sense, from an idea perspective onto how to make and integrate culture, or make sure that culture is part of the integration process or onboarding process. Throughout the day, as we share best practices, if you get an idea, gang, that I said something that made you think of, oh, this is what we do, throw it into chat, because what I'd like to do, if we get some best practice sharing in here and a bunch of ideas in chat, we'll provide that list and send it out to you as part of our follow-up. We'll talk about follow-up afterwards, but this is being recorded. You'll get a copy of the recording, but also if there's a lot of ideas, what a great place to gather them, especially on a hot topic like this, and share those with each other. So if you put them in the chat, we'll sort them out and make sure that everybody gets a copy of it. You don't have to worry about copying and pasting and all that good stuff. Maybe I inspire, or we're inspired together to go back and upgrade, enhance, or refresh our onboarding process, or maybe build one if we don't have it, or to build a top-notch onboarding process. And as always, hopefully, usually I'll trip over myself with some words and something wacky will come out of my mouth, unintentionally, but intentionally. Let's try to have a little bit of fun today, as much as we can, when it's just you all unfortunately staring at me in a slide deck, and me not able to get a chance to see your faces. So let's get into it. And again, thanks for taking the time. I know you're busy and there's a lot going on in our world today, unfortunately, but I'm glad you chose to spend an hour with us. First, I want to go over the foundation of our thinking at CultureWise relative to this topic. And it's this simple belief: the first week a new employee spends in your company is actually the most important week in their career. It's that impactful. And if I can, let's take a step back in time, all of us. The first day of a job that you've had in the past, and some of us, this may be a longer step back into our previous lives, but I want you to try to go there. Think of the discomfort you had. Think of the unease, the nervousness. You're unsure. You got those twists and turns going on day one of that new job. Questions in, will I fit in? How long, or how will I ever learn what the rules are of this place, or the unwritten rules? Will they appreciate my warped sense of humor? Will my lack of fashion sense be evident? And will it be appreciated or scorned? Will someone make fun of my authentic vintage Spider-Man lunchbox? All kinds of questions going through my mind, but I ask you if you can. Now, some of us on this call, we can't remember what it's like, or remember what it was like to be new. And that's a trap that we need to avoid, because if we fail to appreciate just how impactful those days, if we don't remember, we'll fail to appreciate how impactful that first day is, or those first days of the new career are. So the key number one to drill into our heads, or whatever, to remind each other of, is creating a great first day. The key to it is to put ourselves in the shoes of that employee that's starting, or group of employees if you happen to hire a class. Get in their shoes, walk in their moccasins. And I think that's a great starting point. And then working backwards from that in terms of building a program. First week on the job is the most important week in their career. Speaking of, and I said this earlier, we talk about onboarding, and it's the word that we're using because it seems to be, well, I'm going to release a poll question right now. Bear with me because I love doing poll questions. And let me get here. Speaking of, what do you call it? What do you call the new hire welcome process in your companies? If you wouldn't mind just taking a few seconds here, I'm curious as to what the numbers reveal. We'll go a couple minutes here. And then I will wax philosophically on my own personal beliefs. I don't necessarily represent the rest of the leadership team with my thoughts here, but I'll share them with you anyway. Okay, we've got close to 100 people responded, end the poll. And as expected, here are the results. 63% of us call it onboarding. Okay, thus the title that we used. 32% orientation. Okay, integration. One person. I'm not sure if it's one of our employees. And then there were some others, and you can write that in chat. There we go, Trey Thompson. I said integration because David Friedman corrected me when I said onboarding. All right, there's no correction here, Trey, but I love that comment. Here's my point with that question, or my viewpoint, if you will. Orientation. To me, I think in pictures. Some of you know that already. I think in pictures, which sometimes is a curse, but Orientation to me is I'm grabbing that new employee by the shoulders and I'm saying, there's your desk, there's the warehouse, there's the men's room or the ladies' room, there's the lunchroom, whatever. I'm orienting you to your surroundings. We'll touch on the definition a little bit more. Onboarding, okay, this seems to be the more popular choice, if you will. Very popular term, and we'll use it interactively. And I agree. I see Rebecca. Orientation is maybe not as friendly, and we'll talk about that because I want to dig deeper on this. But onboarding, I think in pictures. Onboarding sounds like waterboarding. Waterboarding in my mind is not the image I want first day. You're going to love it here as I'm waterboarding you. So anyway, that's just, sorry for the squirrel moment, but we use the term integration. And my pitch on that is integration, similar to Rebecca. I think integration is we're making them part of something special. There's more intimacy, perhaps more emotion in that term. Onboarding may elicit the same thing rather than orientation. I'm not trying to talk you out of it, but I think it's an interesting discussion. And again, most of us, 2/3 of us, are using the term onboarding right now. So it's not that you're incorrect, Trey, but we like the word integration just because I think it casts a bigger light, shadow, whatever the case may be, on the importance of this particular time in the career. What's our agenda for the day? Well, we're going to talk about orientation versus onboarding. And if I slip up, because I'm so used to using the word integration, please forgive me, but we're talking about the new hire welcome process. I may refer to sometimes and slip and call onboarding integration out of habit. We'll talk about that a little bit, because I think it's, as always, at the beginning of these webinars, I like to make sure the terms were on the same page with the definition of culture. Some of you we've talked about that in the past. And anyway, 2, how to integrating culture into your onboarding process, and making a case for how important and why we want to do that and how to do it. And then we'll take a deeper dive and offer some quick tips. And if there's some ideas that come up, please, again, add them as we go, and making this more of a brainstorming best share session if we can. Here we go, definitions. What's orientation? Rebecca, you talked about it. It seems kind of cold. I forget what your word, or not friendly. Orientation to me is check the logo, the graphic is appropriate. Introduction to staff. It's your job, it's your responsibilities. It's kind of a one-time event, one and done. There's a short-term box way of thinking about that, I think. Boom, it's over and done. We oriented you, now you're oriented, boom. Forms, handbooks, questions. Not that stuff doesn't have to be covered. That's all part of a great process. But that's kind of how we define orientation, what you see how people define orientation versus onboarding. Onboarding or integration, it's more of a strategic business process. It focuses on the individual and us getting them up to speed and provides perspective. And we'll talk more about that and what that should look like. There's a long-term perspective to it, that we're not as concerned with, boom, getting someone right out there, but setting them up for success, long-term success. So there's a long-term perspective. We're going to come back and deal with that and hammer that out a little bit. And an onboarding process or an integration process, it's immersed in culture. Culture is a huge piece of that. And again, I'll make a case for that. And I think most of us would agree. But here we go. So what I like to do is muck it up. I like to just go, what's the world telling us out there, right? Why are we talking about this? There's some interesting things. I enjoy this part of the process in preparation for a webinar to find out some statistics. I love numbers and that reveal statistically significant data. So Career Builder threw this one at us that, engaged employees, if you've got them, that's a real good thing. 87% of them are less likely to leave. We need to increase the engagement in our workforce to create the exit, a great resignation, whatever the case may be. The percentage of engaged employees that say they are less likely to leave, that's a pretty powerful number. Okay. Are we doing a good job? Percentage of employees that strongly agree that their company does a great job of onboarding. Uh-oh, 12%. That's a low number, right? It's important. They stay. They're not going to leave. But all employees say that basically, only 12% say we do a really good job with this. What's the impact of not doing a good job of poor onboarding or integration? Now I feel guilty saying onboarding versus integration. The percentage of employees that have left the company because of a poor onboarding experience, 9%. May not sound, that's 1 in 10, gang. We can't afford to lose people today. And here's something that's interesting. Take that one step further. Percentage of employees that look for a new position in their first 6 months on the job, 33%. That 9% now all of a sudden grows to 33% in the first 6 months. We've got people looking over the fence within that first 6 months. I look at this as, this is in our control. I mean, not every, there's lots of factors, but how we bring that person in and how we secure them into our world and how we make them feel comfortable so that they unpack their bags, which is the idea. That's in our control, and how we do it. How well we do that has a large impact on whether they stay or not. And I know about you guys, we've done webinars before, the war for talent and the challenge that's out there. I mean, come on, we got to keep them. It was hard as hell to find them and get them here. We can't let them leave in the first 6 months. We were talking to that 9%, and this number talks about the poor experience, the poor onboarding. What if you're just doing a mediocre job? I guarantee people leave because of mediocre. That wasn't the question asked, but we've got to step up our game here. Too important. How many leave before their first anniversary? 23%. Really? 1/5 of your new hires, you hire 5 people, one of them's going to leave before the first year. The cost, and you see numbers all over this, and some of you heard me talk about this before. The replacement cost is staggering. It depends on the salary. Sometimes I've seen it, it's 30% of what their salary is it costs to replace them. And those costs add up, and turnover, so on and so forth. And again, with the labor market the way it is right now, I was with a client this week, and I'll be with a client next week working with their employees. Boy, if they could, they'd hire 40 people. They can't afford to lose anybody, and they can't get enough people in the door. It's a precious commodity. We've got to hold on to it. We've got to hold on to those wonderful employees. What's the impact of great onboarding, right? That's what we want to talk about. Stop mucking it up, Bill. Don't be a Debbie Downer, negative Nelly. You do a great job at this. You have a great onboarding process. 69% of your people are going to stay for at least 3 years. You get them for that period of time, you've a good chance they're staying for the long haul. My client talks about the fact that the turnover in the first year is, and this is a well-established, wonderfully cultured company, and they have technicians that work for them, and their turnover percentage for after the first year, when they look at the numbers, if they make it through the first year, they lose 4% of their people. It's in the 30-40% range in that first year. So it's real, but you get them and you do a great job with this. 7 out of 10 stay for at least 3 years. A lot better to the bottom line, right, gang? A lot less disruptive. Percent improvement in the new hire retention when you have an effective onboarding process, integration process. 82% improvement in retention when you jack it up. So maybe some of us, it's kind of something we're not necessarily, maybe we're not doing as good a job as we can. Maybe the attention is on the accent's on the wrong syllable. Maybe we're not focusing on it. And if we do, maybe we'll see the return on that investment in our retention numbers. All right, so let's do another poll question. This is my reminder for the poll questions, as I love poll questions. Just gathering data here, gang. Second poll question, number 2, here we go. I'm curious, how long is your current onboarding process? Is it defined? Interesting. Okay. Get about 90+ people weigh in. Here's the end. Share the results. We're kind of scattered all over the board here. Half a day for some. And again, it depends on the business. I understand that, not judging the business or whatever the case may be. 1 day. The majority, well, 39%, more than a week. 1 week, I would have guessed, would have been the kind of the highest percentage. It's not. But interesting. What does that tell us? It's all over the board. Glad that you could quickly determine, how long is your onboarding process. The good thing about that, regardless of how long it is you have one that you can determine a length of time. So good stuff. All right, we did the mucking around. if you've been a repeat visitor here, you know that this is, the blueprint, how we work with organizations. And if we're helping companies define and drive and leverage their culture for impact, so it impacts everything in their organization, from hiring and retention and morale and results and communication, you name it, right? This is the blueprint for your culture operating system. It's not new to many of you who've been on a call before. I'm going to touch on them briefly, because to make sure that culture is part of the integration process, you better have a well-defined culture. It's what typically attracts the right people to your firm or to your company. It certainly keeps them there. So again, this is a pitch going back a few steps in the process to make sure you define with great clarity your culture. So these 8 steps are all part of that. Briefly, we're going to talk about 1, 2, and 4 in more depth. 4 is the integration piece. 3, right? We've talked about this in the past. Define your culture so that you can find people that fit your organization. I wish I had more people in the pond that you're fishing in for talent. I can't necessarily control that, but doggone it, if someone's looking to move and leave somewhere else and they're the right fit for us, we want them coming to us. They better be the right fit. It's not just about the resume. And that's harder than ever these days when you need a driver, you need a driver. And maybe we cut back on making sure that the cultural fit. I think that's short-sighted. It may solve a problem today. You win the battle, but you lose the war. So we have to select step 3 in our process. Make sure you select people that fit your culture, but that means you got to define it well first. 4, we're going to come back and talk about that. 5, shout it from the rooftops, gang. When you define your culture, and we'll explain what more that looks like in just a minute here, you're defining the behaviors that drive success in your company. It's what you're going to recruit to. It's what's going to attract people outside going, I want to be part of that organization that values these behaviors, right? This is me. They're describing me. And we want those behaviors and those that describe your culture shouted from the rooftops, posted in the office, because it's a language that you're all going to be speaking from. And the more visible you make your culture in your companies and on your websites, the more likely it's going to find its way into not just your talk, but your walk. 6, you've heard me talk about this. We did a webinar on 6, 7, and 8 kind of recently. Coaching's a big need in many organizations and something I think we have to improve upon. But when you define your culture with great clarity via the behaviors that drive success, then you coach specifically to those behaviors. You have real coaching conversations with your people. You look for people doing things well and you compliment on them. And when they don't, we have a platform to coach from, to teach from. Coaching is critical in a high-performing organization, a high-performing culture. And that teaching process may start before they say yes to join your company. And that teaching process and that coaching process better be evident day 1 when they arrive. We'll talk what that looks like. Leading by example, the greatest trait I think of a leader, of a person, is humility. One of the greatest traits. And I think one of the greatest downfalls to leaders and people is an H trait called hypocrisy. When it comes to your culture, gang, when it comes to, you have to lead by example, that your culture is loud and clear, then it better be evident day 1 when they arrive. The red carpet better be out there. We're waiting for you. So they better felt it prior to them stepping into your building. If they're stepping in the non-virtual world, we have to lead by example. Leaders on this call, we know the spotlight's on us. We're watched what we do, what we don't do. People hear what we say and they notice what we don't say. Leading by example, critical aspect to all of you having that high performing culture that we seek. Last but not least, we talked about it last month at our most highly attended webinar that we've done in the last 5. You have to hold people accountable. That means if we've coached them very well, we can get them to where we need to be. But there are people in your organization that may not live by the behaviors, the culture that you so clearly articulated and defined and said is critical. And leaders are leading by example, and all people in your company are leading by example and abiding by these behaviors because it's the right thing to do. But sometimes you have people that don't, and you can't get them to where you need to be, where they need to be. Then we have to make the tough decision to say, we'll miss you. And I say that not with, cold heart, and that's a hard spot, but we're much better coaches in a high performing culture, and we're going to help people get them to where we need them to be. But if they can't get there, we've got to let them go, because that toxin in your organization is going to undermine every effort that you've ever made. We have to get rid of that toxic employee. The employee that brings in the big sale at the end of the year and then takes all the credit for it, but when something goes wrong, they point the fingers of blame. They don't treat people with dignity and respect. They show up late for every meeting. You know the list, you know the person. They can't stay. If you allow them to stay because they bring in the big sale, It undermines everything else, and we fall into the hypocrite bucket. So there are the 8 steps, rapid fire, right? A whole book, David Friedman, our founder, that's the how-to of a high-performing culture and what we help companies build. But today is specifically about integration, and I want to get into a little bit more detail about that. Okay, define your culture in terms of clear behaviors. We're going to spend 2 seconds, 2 minutes, 2 seconds, really. We're going to talk about steps 1, defining your culture in terms of clear behaviors. 2, what we do to practice. Some of you heard me say I carry a fitness app on my phone. Just because I carry it, I'm not in any better shape. You have to apply that stuff, right? Words on the wall don't matter unless you actually live and breathe and behave by those words. We'll talk about what practice is and rituals, how they make that stuff happen. And 3, integrating new hires into your culture and the whole process of making sure that culture's front and center in the integration process. So here we go. Define your culture in terms of clear behaviors. Many of you on this call have core values. I'm not kicking them to the curb. Look at this list. They're wonderful virtues: accountability, integrity, quality, innovation, quality, excellence, respect. Wonderful work. Here's the problem with values and leading and teaching and helping people be better. They're ideas, they're notions that all of us on this call, 90 plus, close to 100 people would define each of those differently. And that murkiness, that gray area, doesn't allow us to use this as a great teaching platform, right? It doesn't clearly define our culture when those 4 core values describe us. What does that mean? What's accountability mean? So when we talk about step 1 in the process, and again, you know us, it's about behaviors. Culture is behaviors. It's how things are done around here, gang, how we act and behave. So tell people exactly how to act and behave. That's what leaders do. Leaders set up vision, mission, core values. But as it's been proven, I think time and time again and over time, that that's not enough. That if you want to drive a high performing culture in your organization, you can't do it on the foundation of just values. That doesn't mean we disrespect what could be 3 or 4 generations old, but we've got to dig deeper and we got to get to the level of providing clarity around what is success defined by here. How do we behave that leads to success? We set clear expectation. We honor commitments. We listen generously. We speak straight. We do the right thing always. We practice blameless problem solving. We get clear on expectations. I said that. We deliver results. We have fun. We treat everyone with dignity and respect. We pay attention to the details. We treasure and protect and promote our reputation. I can go on and on and on, but all of those are instructions. All of those bring clarity about the behaviors that are required and lead to our success that all of us sign up for and are doing anyway. But as we say in our business, and you're sharing with folks, that the world-class organizations, everybody that wants to be the world-class organization, the organization that stands above those that they compete with because it's a very look-alike industry. The industries that do that, they do the ordinary things with extraordinary consistency. And this gets us to that level of consistency. Clarity comes from taking a deeper dive than just values. You'll notice those are action-oriented, those behaviors. They're instructions. So we want to bring clarity. Again, why am I spending time on this? Because before you bake culture into your integration and make it the star of the show, it better exist. It better be defined. This is the output of these happen to be we call them fundamentals, behaviors that are fundamental to our success. This is what we practice here at HPC or CultureWise. We have 30 of them. I'll give you a couple minutes to come pick yourself off the floor after falling off. It's 30, you kidding me? I can't remember 4 things at the grocery store. I know, I'm with you, I'm the same. You never have to memorize this stuff. But this brings clarity to your organization and describes very clearly to a new employee, what are the rules around here? There's no unwritten rules. We've written them all out. Get clear on speak straight, practice the human touch, honor commitments, check your ego at the door. Who's arguing with that? But that's a level we have to get to. And we'll talk about how does this come off the card and get into our walk and talk. And how is this part of the integration process? And where does this show up? And we'll get to that a little bit. What we do, basically, we got this from the Ritz-Carlton. I'd love to say we invented this on our own. We made some tweaks to what we learned from the Ritz-Carlton, who still does this. We learned this back in 2003. Ritz-Carlton has 20 basics. Every employee in the Ritz-Carlton world carries around the card with their 20 basics. And then every day they show up to start their job, and they're in a team meeting, what they call a daily lineup with their department. Everywhere in the world, a Ritz-Carlton employee does this. In that daily lineup, they review one of their basics every day. In our world, and what our clients, and we have some clients on this call, whatever, but what we propose, if you will, as a practice, is to focus on one of these fundamentals a week for the rest of your career. What does that look like? Let's get into step 2 of the process before we really hammer home the integration piece. Practice. I'm from the Philadelphia area. Allen Iverson went viral years ago. Practice. Yeah, you've got to practice. You have to repeat certain behaviors. You do it over and over and over again, and eventually it finds its way and you internalize it. But that takes repetition. Rituals make things last. Examples, brushing our teeth. None of us debated this morning whether to brush our teeth or not, I hope. Maybe there's 1 or 2 of you that did. But anyway, I'm at home, I'm in Zoom. No one's going to smell my morning, whatever. Sorry, I don't need to go there. We don't think about brushing we do it. The national anthem is played before every sporting event in our country. Not sometimes, not when we have enough time after the commercial. No, it's something you have ritualistic meetings in your companies now, whether it be a safety meeting, a sales meeting, an ops meeting, a leadership team meeting. You have rituals now, right? That makes, you don't think about them, they just get done. And that's what we have to deploy in our companies regarding the practice of our fundamentals or those behaviors. Rituals are the defense against the distraction we all face in our daily lives. Rituals are a defense against the eroding discipline that we all experience from time to time. My quick point there is, if you went to the gym in early January, you couldn't find a parking spot. If you go to the gym now, front row, people have bailed already on there, and we've seen it. I've literally had that happen to me. Rituals prevent the shiny new toy management idea or initiative in our company from falling into the shiny new toy management idea graveyard. Squirrel. We go to the latest book we read. New idea for integration, new idea for culture, new idea for sales, new idea for ERPs, whatever the case may be. And rituals make sure that great idea that is worthy of sticking sticks. What's that look like? Your safety meeting. So we say practice a fundamental once a week. You have 25 of them. Next 25 weeks, first ritual, your leader is sending out a weekly insight, his or her commentary on that fundamental. Teach, coach, lead by example. Keep it top of mind. Put the spotlight on it once a week. A weekly insight goes out on Monday to everybody. Second thing, you have meetings throughout the day. Rituals already that are occurring. It could be a safety meeting. You just bump your fundamental to the first part of the agenda. Hey, we saw the message that came out from Bruce earlier today on honor commitments. Gang, why do you think that's so important to us back here in the warehouse to do what we say we're going to do when we said we're going to do it? In fact, what's the downside of some of our teammates on the other side of this wall not getting things when we said we'd get them to them? And we have a quick conversation. And all of a sudden, this stuff isn't just words on a wall or a card we carry around. It's finding our way. And the more we talk about it, guess what? It impacts the way we react. Perhaps the next time we're in a situation when that fundamental or that behavior can guide and impact positively the way we respond. Rituals. All right, step 2 in that outline that we talked about. We talked about orientation and onboarding / integration. Now let's get into point 2 of let's get into some integration. Integrating culture into onboarding. Great quote from David Friedman, our fearless leader. And it's an analogy he's written about in his books before. You think about showing up day one. And if you're not prepared, and onboarding isn't a process that's defined for you and you kind of wing it, if you even wing it, it's like someone coming in and we want them to see us in a certain way. But if you're not prepared, you don't put the attention to it, it's like they're grabbing a box of random prescription glasses outside and they just randomly put one on. And that could be the person in a sense, or the first few people that they see that impacts how they perceive this organization, the first people they bump into. No one's ready for me. Somebody's cursing and F-bombing in the back. Wait a minute. We don't want them to pick the glasses to view our organization in a random box of prescriptions. We want to hand them the glasses and the prescription that we want them to view our organization through. That's a way to think about onboarding and integration in a different way. In a sense, this sounds awful, but it's like we're brainwashing an employee. but it's a good way. If that can I say, is that an oxymoron? Is that a jumbo shrimp? Or anyway, there is such a thing as good brainwashing. There is, as of today, officially, 2:00 Eastern time. Done properly, you have the opportunity to shape the perceptions of that new employee by giving them the prescription you want them to view your organization through. It starts before they show up day one. And it's certainly taking place day one when we're there, and half a day, 1 day, week, over a week, however long your process is. I think it's a neat quote and a neat analogy. But again, I'm cheesy and corny, and you may not agree, but hopefully that helped. So 3 steps in this process that I want to talk about a little bit. 1, when we integrate culture into our onboarding integration process, it's the star of the show. 2, you need to have a long-term perspective, and we'll talk about that. And 3, you need to be uncompromising. So let's tackle each of these. Culture. It's number 1 because it's the star of the show. And if culture is not part of, in fact, let me, I'll do that in a little bit. I won't go to a poll question right now. I'll do it when we're done this slide. It should be the number 1 objective in the integration process and the onboarding process. Start with culture. That's what I mean. It's the star of the show. We start with culture. It needs to be taught. How do you teach it? You have your fundamentals. You have the behaviors defined clearly. You teach it with a sit down day 1. You teach it via a Zoom meeting if you're in the virtual world, day 1. In fact, I was raised when we did this in our company, RSI, where our whole culture journey began. You were greeted by a mentor when you showed up at the doors of RSI in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. You got to walk around, you know where your desk is, if you will. You see signs welcoming you all around the office. There's a plan on your desk. Your business cards are ready. No surprise that you showed up, and we were ready for you. You have a binder, an integration manual that outlined everything, lots of material to read, so on and so forth. You're presented that by your mentor. So it's the first half hour. And then guess what? The next 2 hours, you sat down with David, our CEO, and you reviewed our culture, and you reviewed our fundamentals, one by one. A 2-hour meeting that happened each and every time, 0 exceptions. If it can't be the CEO in your organization, because think about the statement that makes. The passion of a CEO talking about culture, first thing, welcoming a new employee, getting involved. Doesn't that make a statement about how important culture is? We mean business about culture here in our organization. We're talking about it. We're committed to our culture. That can be a 30-minute meeting. For us, it was 2 hours. There's some flexibility in here. I realize that. We could talk more about it. Maybe you back it up in the future with an e-learning tool or videos or group meetings where you get employees of the organization, part of the week-long integration program. You get employees and you have meetings gathered, 1, to meet the new employee. 2, they talk about their favorite fundamental or a fundamental that's really important for our department here, whatever the case may be. But in that meeting, that leader's reviewing the rituals and the fundamentals out of the gate. Culture, number 1. 2, we get into the context of your job. How does this new employee fit into the big picture, right? Everybody needs to understand that. If they don't understand it, right, I believe we're limiting the extent to which they can make a meaningful contribution in our organization. So context, give it to them. History of the company. Back in our RSI days, one of the partners of the firm would drive a new employee or new employees around. Here's where the house that the Friedman family started the business in. Here was our first office. Here are some places to eat. I mean, just a history tour and a logistics tour a little bit. We'll talk about logistics. Talk about the strategy of our organization. How are we different? What's our differentiation? Who are the competitors out there? And how do we win? How do we make money in this business? What does each department do? How are we structured? All that context is critical and appreciated day 1 or week 1 by a new employee. That may be a 30-minute discussion, gang. If you don't have that kind of time, revolving around the org chart, or we can get in deep to it, again, depending on the time that we want to devote to this. But context comes after culture. And you can also get other employees and departments involved to share what they do from their perspective. Neat concept of getting others involved and also teaching that new employee. Culture, context, last, logistics. I think sometimes we go to logistics. Here's where it comes to me. It sounds a little bit like orientation. There's your desk. Blah, blah, blah. How does the copier work? How do I make coffee? Someone help me with, how do I do voicemail? What's the phone system like? Who takes care of business card orders? Where do I go with HR paperwork? Who's my contact with IT? How do I work the conference room, big screen in there and conference, all that stuff. What's the combo for the back door? Where do I get extra supplies, pens, papers, Post-it notes? Hey, where do they hide the TP around here? Like, that's all the kind of stuff that's important, that either that's the only thing we deal with, or we don't even bother with those things, those mundane things, but they're very important. So here's a suggestion. If you're not sure what that list is, interview the last 5 people you hired and ask them, name 3 things you wish people had shared with you day one or told you about day one. There's your list. Pretty simple way to appeal to someone new who's got like wide eyes, big ears, and just waiting for, please give me this information. Make sense? Poll question. Here we go, to the polls. Excuse me, while I get, let me ask you this. Do you ever, no, I'm not gonna go there. I'm gonna change up, excuse me. Does your onboarding program integration include a discussion or explanation of your current culture, expectations, etc.? Interesting. Okay. Let it go because it's still, the numbers are still changing. So pretty equal split between yes, they do, and sort of. And sort of, okay. Little bits better than nothing at all. 17%, no, it doesn't. And I think the question here is that we can improve upon what we share and how we describe our program and how we're discussing our culture, so on and so forth, and leverage that, given the strength that it is. So again, thanks for bearing with me on the poll questions. I think it's interesting to see where people are. So let's go back to the second point that I was talking about, and that is the long-term perspective that's required. We talked, number one, about culture first. It's the star of the show. Second point is a long-term perspective. We're investing a lot of time, energy, and resources in a quality integration program. So we've got to keep perspective. Let's say integration is for a week. Well, the short-term mindset says, yikes, that's a quarter of the month's production, perhaps. A quarter of the month that I'm not getting really any value back from this employee. Lost production, whatever the case may be. Long-term perspective is that's 2% of the year. Or if you think in 5 to 10 year windows, it's inconsequential that first week. You can't go back and add to it after the fact. Releasing a new employee into the wild before they're perhaps ready, I think leads to a suspect return on our investment. You spend an awful lot of, this is a gift, this new employee. It's real hard to get them, real hard. And we've got to keep them. So let's spend the time, and you spend a lot of money attracting them to your organization. Perhaps, like many of us are doing now, it costs you some money in terms of a sign-on bonus. It costs you a referral fee to current employees to find the right people. You've got a lot of this stuff invested. Don't shortcut it now that they're there. Spend the time and make this a valuable, we saw the numbers earlier, in terms of they hang around, the better the program is, the more engaged they are, the longer they stay, which is the name of the game. So time, resources, get that return on your investment. And I think it's more because of the long-term perspective. Be uncompromising. Couple things here. One, every single employee goes through integration. No exceptions. When I think back to our RSI days and the importance of integration, if you could start on a Monday and after David, left the insurance business and I was there kind of filling his shoes or attempting to, if you could start on a Monday, but he wasn't available on a Tuesday, you started Tuesday. We didn't, and everybody went through integration. Now, integration can look different for different people in your organizations, right? You're part-time, salaried, you name it. Differences, salaried, not salaried, you know the drill, but different groups of folks could have a different orientation or program or onboarding or integration, whatever. How did I throw orientation in there? Everyone is deserving. Every employee deserves a great first impression. Give it to them. And don't get caught up in the, sometimes I think the discipline is we get, expediency and desperation challenge you to cut corners or compromise. And I think in the long term, that's very detrimental. That's costly. All positions go through this. Maybe it's, again, you alter the program, which leads to the third point of it's okay to be flexible. Different program for different positions, different length of time. Usually that's the variable, is how long the integration program is. And that depends on the position, so on and so forth. But everybody's got to go through it. If you can only afford a couple of days of it, it's the best 2 days you can organize. And it's jam-packed, so on and so forth. First impressions, gang, we've got to stick to it. We've got to stick to creating that great first impression for everybody. Sidebar here on first impressions. I don't know if this makes any sense to you, but I go to a restaurant, I'm on the road. This happened to me this weekend. I had to travel to Columbia, South Carolina. So I went to the restaurant Saturday night. I was doing meetings with a client on Sunday. I go to the restaurant and I walk up to the hostess table in the restaurant that's part of the hotel I was at. And she was busy on her phone, I guess, and looked up at me and goes, "Just you?" And this happens a lot. And this is a pet peeve, but talk about first impression. That just knocks me off my stride a little bit. Yeah, just me. I'm lonely. I have no friends, no family right now. It's just me. First impressions matter, right? We don't want people thinking that when they walk in our doors. Everyone gets the royal treatment, right? However long it is. Uncompromising, don't waver. Deeper dive. Let's get into some stuff here. We've got about 15 minutes. I'd love for a chance for some questions or maybe to address some of the things that are in chat. I know there's a lot of stuff in chat right now. I see the numbers, but I don't see the words. It's too distracting. So Tyler's keeping an eye on that stuff. Let's get into a deeper dive and some quick tips, right? Rubber meets the road kind of stuff. It's cliche Thursday. 1, the importance of extending the warm welcome. 2, establishing relationships are very important. We'll talk about some things there. And just setting expectations, being clear about what we're going about. So here we go. When does integration begin? Not when they step in day one. I think integration, welcoming a new employee, starts before they start. It's how we interview in that whole process and how our culture is displayed then. But there are some things we can do pre-employment, some ideas that we've done, clients of ours have done. Send a welcome basket. This meeting that I was at Sunday, they asked their employees to come in for a 3-hour meeting. There were 2 sessions on a Sunday. But you know what? And people really appreciated this. And it's a little bit, but there was a welcome bag for them. Chapstick, hand sanitizer, t-shirt, homemade company logoed cookie, a little notebook, cool little pocket notebook thing and a pen, candy spread out. Imagine this. Someone hasn't started yet. You send them a welcome basket. There's maybe a video in there. There could be a book that your owner, David, has written books. We send books out. Or a video. We'll talk about that in a second. But there's stuff there's tchotchkes that you have, a keychain, something with the logo. It shows up to their home. Their family sees it. Pretty cool. Everyone gets excited. It's nice to be welcomed that way. Let people know. 2, make a video. They haven't started yet. Record yourself on a Zoom video. Get some of your teammates around that are going to be joining them. They're coming out to your sales team. They're coming into the HR staff. Do a Zoom, record it. We're looking forward to meeting you, Tyler, next Wednesday. I'm available. And if you have questions before that, here's my cell phone number. Call me, whatever. And it's a personal video. Wow. What a cool thought. We know how to do Zoom. You can send the Zoom recording to someone. Do it on your FaceTime them. Who knows? Could be a little creepy, but hey. Set up a session beforehand. Find out what their computer needs are, what their skill set is. Here's a password. You can go in and access our system now if you want. Maybe that's not protocol, but some of the things that get people wiggy before they start is the computer stuff. Oh boy, I'm coming from the Apple world, I'm going to the PC world, or vice versa, who knows what. But maybe there's an IT session prior to it that'll help ease some of those initial wonky feelings. Provide that employee an agenda for the week. Let them know what's ahead. Sometimes that's the stuff that, oh, do I get lunch? Am I allowed to breathe? Have it all spelled out. What does that say about you? One is, we're ready for you. We have prepared for you. You are that important that you deserve an entire agenda and schedule. And people, look at all the people. It's just a great statement, but I think, boy, that makes me feel special. You wonder about that stuff. Again, go back to the questions you had in your mind when you started day one. Answer it with an agenda for the week. That's all before they even show up. We used to David would send cassettes, recordings of him, recording, talking about some of our fundamentals. It could be something motivational. There's a lot of neat things you can do. You're a lot more creative than I am, but roll it out, man. Get creative in that process. I say virtually here, and sometimes the ideas that we're talking about, whether you're in the remote reality or not, they apply in either world, as long as we're still doing something about it. So think about, you don't have a mentor greeting you at the door when you show up because there's no door to show up at, but there could be a Zoom meeting at 9 a.m. So I just hired, I have a new employee, a wonderful woman from Northern Boston, just joined us. So she reports to me, and day one, 9 o'clock, Zoom meeting. We had connections prior to that because of the interview process, so on and so forth. She received material prior to our first official meeting as fellow teammates. 9 o'clock was the lay of the land. Here's the agenda, what our week is going to look like. And at 9:30, she went on a call with David for 2 hours and talked about our culture. Right? I was the liaison, but you can appoint a mentor or someone to be the contact virtually. Do video calls. I know you're all probably zoomed out. You're zooming out right now, potentially. Oh my gosh, this guy's still going. But Zoom has been it bridges the gap. You can look at me and see my dorky sweater and I'm smiling here and there, and we get a feel for each other. Now, it's a way to extend ourselves in a cold, technologically challenging world and still be people, and utilize video left and right, virtually. You have meetings, you have show and tells, you share screens, not a phone call, a video call. Send out a company announcement and copy the new employee. Remind, hey, high performing culture, CultureWise. Caroline Niles is starting on Monday, and copy Caroline in. Now guess what? What happens in our world, and I'm sure it would happen in your world, they're sending her emails. Welcome aboard, can't wait to meet you, blah, 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 blah. We're stirring it up because we're excited about this employee. Let them know that. Make sure you build in time during that week. Again, the warm welcome, but when we get into the week and what they're doing, whatever the schedule looks like, time to absorb all this wonderful stuff you've given them. In the schedule, it's not Zoom, 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 Zoom. There's a TV show in that little analogy there, but that's, again, dating myself. We're going to Zoom anyway. Give people a chance to breathe in that week, that day, the 2 days, whatever the time frame is. You're giving them a lot of great information. It's well orchestrated, right? It's choreographed. Give them a chance to breathe. Maybe in that first week, I had a conversation with one of my colleagues say, one thing I said to my new employee, that there may be times in the day where you don't have anything to do. That's okay. That won't last. But in the first week, there's some time for you to take a breath and review some of the information that we went through, or read the material that we've provided you, or to get to know us better on our website, so on and so forth. Time for absorption is a warm feeling and part of the warm welcome. The other thing too that you can do virtually, and this could be done beforehand or that first week, create a library of great documents, go-tos. Here's access to HubSpot and a cheat sheet for HubSpot. Here's access to our internal database. Here's the content library. Here are the articles that we put out on social media. There's a library of what we've put out. Start reading, it'll give you a great sense of who we are. You can provide that, put it in Teams or whatever, and give them access and refer to that and teach from that. But boy, isn't that welcoming that you're getting the insights. You're now on the inner circle. Establishing relationships, another goal and a point that we need to, part of what we want to accomplish during integration. Use technology, gang. Set up the chat room. If you're hiring a lot of people, create a chat room for new members. Have them meet once a week. Encourage them to do so. New members talking to new members, team members, that's not a bad thing, right? Guess what's going to come out of there too, by the way? it will fuel great ideas for your next integration program, which I will challenge you. And we did this at RSI. It doesn't make it great. We weren't perfect, but every integration ended with a debrief of how that training went. And what are 3 things that we can do and improve it for the next class or the next person that's hired? Get yourself in that relentless pursuit of improvement, because you can always do something more and improve upon the process. We don't go backwards with integration. We only go forward and create even better steps. So create a lounge, a place for them to convene with other new members. Set up one-on-one calls with the team. Get them to know the team as soon as possible. We are purposeful about it here at HPC CultureWise. We set up team meetings. 3 different Zoom meetings I hosted so that Caroline could meet her teammates. Throughout the question, tell a couple things. 1, tell Caroline what you do, how long you've been with the organization, maybe 1 piece of personal information, and 1 piece of advice for the new person starting at CultureWise. There you go. There's your agenda. And now we get people to know each other, and there's value being delivered in addition to just establishing a new relationship. The sooner they get to know everybody, do that up front. Back in our RSI days, we had 110 employees at our peak, and integration was a full week program. At the end of the week, there was a test. And the test was about personal information. Who danced with a bear on the Mike Douglas show? Whose daughter tried out for American Idol? Who, and all this neat, it wasn't just about the business stuff. It was about getting to know each other and establishing those relationships, because we're going to lean on each other. We are an amazing team here. We got a wonderful culture. And if I know a little bit of something about you, maybe I don't hesitate to ask you for help or to extend help to you, because we're not just, we both punch clocks together. No, we're part of something special. And then do some fun stuff. We've done this, right? Have a Zoom cocktail party if you're in the virtual environment. Bring that person into whatever existing fun takes place. Catch them up on some maybe stories so they know what we're all talking about and joking about. Do a trivia. You guys have done this, that have battled through the last 2 years of isolation, right? But virtual is no excuse to not put the attention to this process that it deserves. So get creative and utilize the technology that we have. Final poll question. Last but not least, this isn't a big finish question here. It's just one I haven't asked. It's the last one. Speaking of, I said earlier, the importance of getting feedback. Do you ever ask for feedback on your onboarding process from that new employee? Do you have a process in place to get that valuable information? Wow, okay. Interesting. I would say, as I look at these numbers here, and I'll share the poll with you in a second, and the poll, this is probably the biggest eye raiser. My socks are going up and down. My eyebrows are raising. My socks are going up. There's a whole lot of movement going on right now. I'm surprised by this one. 56% of you don't ask that question. So if there's anything that you go back and do differently after this afternoon, get that critical feedback. Because otherwise you're not improving the process, or you're improving your process based upon your own interpretation, rather than making it improving based upon the feedback you're getting from people that just went through the process. So interesting stat there. Go back and ask. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. There's a lot of questions coming up that I'm going to, bottom line, the pitch here, one of our favorite quotes, if you will, that good companies have good cultures by chance, but it's the world-class companies that have world-class cultures by design. And I will extend that to mean that a world-class integration program puts culture front and center, gets feedback from employees, improves upon itself each and every time. And guess what? Those numbers that we mucked around earlier, they don't pertain to you, because people are dying to get into your organization and they stay because culture was number one, day one showed up and is part of each and every day in their career with you, because you practice it and it doesn't just fall off the edge of the table. So here's what you get for attending this webinar. We got 5 minutes left, so we'll hit some questions, but I'll address the questions in our follow-up to you as well. That follow-up is probably going to come out early next week because we're creating a couple documents to share with you. 1, you're going to get a recording of this webinar. 2, link to helpful couple articles that I researched, whatever, that our own content manager developed. I'm not a smart guy. I'm smart that I go get information from other people that are smarter. So those articles are coming your way. Some templates, a welcome to the company template letter. You don't have to create it on your own, but just some ideas I think that may be helpful for you. Sample announcements, how to announce this to the rest of the organization that I mentioned as an idea. Sample CEO notes, what you can write and send, the wording to send to someone prior to them joining you. Just a couple of templates that we feel may be helpful. So that's a coming your way. As always, do the cool QR code thing, whatever. If you want to talk to me more about this topic, if we're running out of time today, we'll get you all this information, but let me quickly go. And I don't know the best way to, let's see, there's a lot of chat. I'll leave my contact information up there for you. Is there anything, Tyler, you want to, appreciate the kind words, and don't hesitate to say unkind words to me, because that's the only way I can get better too.
Hey, Bill,
yeah,
I'll jump
thanks,
in here
Tyler.
real quick. Yeah. So Jackie had a question about how do you handle the current person conducting orientation not wanting to make any changes? They say these people only want the paycheck and don't want to bring any life to the day. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and let me temper what I really want to say. But so I think,
yeah.
So Jackie, great question, and please forgive my simple approach to it. You've got a culture problem. You've got someone that doesn't fit your culture, and that to me is, as if that's someone that reports to me, I'm reminding someone, I'm going back and saying, hey, part of our culture is to treat everyone with dignity and respect. Part of our culture and our integration is to welcome someone and treat them, with warmth and kindness and education from day one and throughout their career here. And if that's not something that one of your people is willing to do, that's responsible for that, we've got a problem here. We'll miss you. And I hate to be that way. I will coach that person up. And sometimes we haven't been clear enough on the expectations of that position. But if we're clear on the expectations of the position, and they're flying in the face of what we've determined is the best way to welcome new employees into our wonderful organization, and they're not doing it, they don't belong in our company. And I'm sorry if that sounds callous, gang. What else? Anything else?
I definitely agree, but yep. So actually a follow-up on that from Jackie, which I think you kind of just answered. She was kind of wondering, how do we combat the tough guy mentality of like long tenured employees? But I think you pretty much covered it. Like they probably don't fit the culture,
They don't. And it's interesting. Sometimes we think that our long tenured employers are the ones that dig their heels in. And I've just spent 3 mornings, 7 a.m. dealing with some technicians at a company, a great client of ours that have been practicing their fundamentals for 8 years. I had a guy yesterday, 43 years with the company. He was the most vocal talking about culture in the meeting that we were doing. He it's not always the longest tenured employee that digs the heels in and fights this stuff. They're the ones that welcome it, because the reason someone's lasted 28 years, 43 years is they're doing it right. They're good people for the most part. And sometimes the long tenured people have been allowed to be jerky. And sometimes they see a practice like this and fundamentals and behaviors, and wait a minute, that I do that stuff. I'm not going to argue with that. What do you mean I have to start telling the truth, right? None of these behaviors rock somebody off their, change their world dramatically. Some, get rebooted and recharged by it, and some may not. And, again, I'm not, it sounds like I'm just like, oh, Bill likes to fire people. No, I hate it. Don't want to, but I'm going to stand by our culture. And if I don't make the move for those employees, however long they've been here, if they fly in the face of what we talk about, I'm now the hypocrite. Don't want to fall into that trap.
I love that.
Jackie, if you want to talk more, there's my contact information. Be more than happy to. It's tough we're trying to rapid fire. In fact, we're at the end. So if you have to bail, folks, please do so. There's still a lot of people on the call. If there's any other questions, we're going to look at these questions and I'll provide follow-up to them. It'll be early next week, no later than Wednesday, where we get all this information promised to you. Sound good?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds good, man. I do have one question that I think everybody that's left on the call might be curious about. Mega, I believe, is your name. Sorry if I'm getting it wrong, but they were wondering how much information is too much information on the first day. I feel like you could span this across any industry, and this is something that everybody's wondering that's a leader.
Yeah, I think that that's a trap, right? Because there's so much information. But that's why we like to spread it out. Give me 5 solid days and I can put the breathing room in there that's needed. Here's the other thing. Ask an employee that's gone through it. Was there, and I was doing that constantly with Caroline. Is this too much? If so, put the hand up. We'll boot this over to tomorrow's Zoom session. So constant feedback during that process to making sure it's not like the fire hose treatment. Constant communication with employees asking that, and then you'll get better at that over time, realizing what the cadence is, what the pace is. Experience will help dictate that, but ask the employee, how's the pace? How's the pace? How's the pace? All right, that's it. We've gone over. Tyler, making sure we get these questions. I'm going to leave it open, but thank you everybody for your time. I hope our paths cross in the future. Call me anytime. You know, I love talking about this stuff. Thank you very much, all. Tyler, you and I can, all these questions, will we be capturing those?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah, I see
Okay.
one from Gary that we'll send a follow-up to that one, Gary. I think that's a great question on, you know, how do you begin establishing a good culture when you had a bad one? And I think that's a pretty big topic for us here. And so I think Bill will have some actionable steps everybody can take, and we'll address those in the follow-up. But appreciate everybody sitting on, and appreciate your time, Bill.
Thank you, Tyler. All right, peeps, stay healthy. Tyler, let's just make sure we get all those questions saved somehow.
Yep.
All right. Thank you all. Take care now.
See ya.